Hello everyone, welcome back to another book to game comparison video. Today I'm going to be talking about The White Wolf of Icicle Creek. As usual, I'm going to start by looking at the novel, which is The Mystery of the Mother Wolf and was printed in 2002, and then I'm going to be looking at the computer game, which is The White Wolf of Icicle Creek and was released in 2007. And I'm going to be giving a spoiler alert, of course, because I'm going to be talking about not just details of the two stories, but the culprits themselves. I'm going to be very specific for both the book and the game. There's not much that's going to be kept secret. So with that, let's move on. So start by looking at the novel. We are looking at The Mystery of the Mother Wolf, which is number 164 of the Nancy Drew Digest paperback series. So let's talk about the actual mystery of this book. So we have Nancy, Bess, and George who are on vacation. I mean, how often is Nancy on vacation when she stumbles upon a mystery? And they are in Wyoming at a place called Elk River Ranch, which is owned by the friend of Nancy's, Aunt Eloise. And they learn that the owners have a tame pet wolf. Her name is Rainbow. She was rescued a few years earlier when she was just a pup. Her siblings and mom had drowned, and the marshals happened to see her and save her, and they've kept her as a pet. And in the meantime, she's bred with their husky and has wolf dog puppies, which was pretty exciting. And they're apparently very beautiful animals and well sought after. The night after the girls arrive, Rainbow is kidnapped, or dog-napped, or wolf-napped, whatever name you want to use or word you want to use, which becomes the instigation for Nancy looking into a mystery. And then shortly thereafter, the wolf dog puppies are also taken. So we've had this really terrible kidnapping of these beloved animals. We also learned that there are plans to build a wolf sanctuary on the property, and this has created a lot of tension in the community. There's been fear from the ranchers that if a wolf sanctuary is created, if the wolves move beyond their boundary, they're going to be attacking cattle, and the negative impact this is going to have on ranchers. So there's a lot of tension over this forthcoming project. As the group is diving into the mystery of the stolen wolf and her puppies, they run into a few accidents, if you will. They find themselves stuck on a chairlift, which was clearly not an accident. And then they go dog sledding, and the strap has been cut and snaps and happens to be in a very precarious part of the trail. And then there's also a threatening note that's left at the lodge. So they're really coming up against forces who don't want them to find the puppies in particular. So the characters in the book, we'll start with the Marshall families. We have Alice and John. Alice, again, is a friend of Aunt Eloise. And then we have their daughter Genevieve, who goes by Jenny. We have her fiance, Paul Ferrier, and he's the one behind the wolf sanctuary plans. His aunt, Stella Stevenson, lives not too far away. And then we have the guests, Dodie and Dexter Warner. It's father and son who are on holiday. Dodie happens to know someone else in the community who will be mentioned shortly. We have Ross Minkowski, who's a ranch hand. Rusty Marconi, who is a sort of terrifying and dangerous neighbor, and then Bill Aaron, and this is someone who is really against the wolf sanctuary and is a friend of Dodie Warner. And what we learn in the end is that Ross and Stella kidnap Rainbow and her puppies with the intention of selling the wolf dog puppies and returning Rainbow afterward. So they're doing this for financial gain. That is the mystery of the Mother Wolf. Next, let's look at the computer game. So this is The White Wolf of Icicle Creek. It is game number 16 in the Nancy Drew Adventure series by Her Interactive. So in this story, we have Nancy, who is not on vacation. She is actually hired right off the bat by the Icicle Creek Lodge owner, Chantal Moweekwe. And there's been a bunch of sabotage at the lodge, and she would like Nancy to figure out who is behind these dirty tricks and these horrible accidents in air quotes. And while there, Nancy winds up interacting with this lone wolf, which seems far too comfortable with humans. The wolf is not keeping her distance as she should. Nancy also finds herself in danger on a few other occasions. She's briefly trapped in an avalanche, which leads to her first interaction with the wolf. The fishing shack she's in explodes, and she finds herself jumping from ice floe to get herself to safety. And then, of course, we just have the freezing temperature she's in. The winter in Alberta, it's cold, freezing temperatures can be deadly. So she has that also as an opponent. So the characters in the game include Ollie and Freddie Randall. Ollie is the handyman and Freddie is his daughter. Belle Kessler, who is a guest with a history at the lodge that we don't learn about right away. Lou Talbot, who is a university student. Guadalupe Comillo, who is seemingly a guest but is really there because of the wolf. And Yanni Volkstaya, who is a world champion skier, who we think is there just potentially training for a future ski competition, but we learn later on that's not the case. As we continue through the game, things wrap up in a few different ways. We learn that Lupe is responsible for some of the wolf-related incidences, so sabotaging Ollie's gun, for instance. She's not behind the accidents that have hurt any of the guests. That is all Yanni. He's been sabotaging the inn while he's searching for uranium, which he's doing on behalf of the Fredonian government. So we have a few different motivations in the game than we do for the book. So speaking of which, let's start that comparison, and we're going to start with the titles. They aren't the same, but they are fairly similar. So the book again is The Mystery of the Mother Wolf, whereas the game is The White Wolf of Icicle Creek. So our titles do both tie in the element of the wolf. So they are a little bit different, which is suitable because our game isn't talking about necessarily a mother wolf, and it's very specific to where the wolf is, which is Icicle Creek. So I think that change is quite appropriate. We can look at the storyline, starting with the book. We have Nancy who's on holiday. She offers to help locate a missing pet wolf named Rainbow and her puppies. So it's pretty straightforward there. Whereas the game, Nancy is asked to find a saboteur and finds herself unearthing a mystery involving a human-friendly wolf. So our storylines are different, even though they do both involve a wolf to some degree. Locations are similar. They are both set at a ski lodge in snowy mountains, but they are in different countries. So our book takes place in Montrose, Wyoming, United States, whereas the game takes place in Icicle Creek, Alberta, Canada. And these locations are actually really important, and I'll get to that toward the end of this video. But for now, let's look at characters. And the nice thing about this, even though almost all the characters have different names, they have very similar roles between the two mediums, and we haven't seen much of that lately, so I appreciate being able to do this comparison. It's been a lot easier than the last few. So we'll start with the lodge owner, and that would be Alice or Chantal. In the book, we have Alice and her husband who run the lodge. Alice is a friend of Nancy's Aunt Eloise, and they have a tame wolf named Rainbow that the family has kept for a few years, and Alice herself is a proponent for wolves. She's really behind the wolf sanctuary idea. Now we look at the game counterpart, which is Chantal. She hears about Nancy through the Raleighs, so there is there's a connection. It's a little bit different. So in the book, Nancy is told of, Nancy knows Alice through her Aunt Eloise. In the game, Chantal hears about Nancy through Bess and George's aunt and uncle. So some familial connections, but on a bit of a different level. And Chantal, she wants the wolf gone from the property. She's not pro-wolf, she's very anti-wolf. So their personalities are a little bit different, even though they're both lodge owners in the two stories. So then we'll move on to Paul and Guadalupe. In both stories, they're proponents for wildlife protection. So in the book, we have Paul, who again is the fiance of Jenny Marshall, Jenny being the daughter of Alice and John. And Paul works with wolves and has been on expeditions to relocate wolves from Canada to the United States. And he intends to build a wolf sanctuary on the lodge property. His game counterpart, Guadalupe Comillo, works for Run and Grow Free, which is an organization that protects wildlife. And her aim is to learn about the wolf that's at Icicle Creek and then relocate it to a sanctuary. So some similarities there. Then we can look at Bill. This is the one character where the name doesn't change. It's amazing. Bill is an anti-wolf citizen. So in the book, we have Bill Errett, and he's worried that the wolf sanctuary will pose a threat to his ranch. Again, because he's a cattle rancher, wolves are going to potentially go after the cows. In the game, Bill is a guest with, again, a history relating to the lodge that we're not even going to get into in this video. But he thinks that the wolf, Isis the wolf, is really quite unusual, doesn't act the way wild wolves should, and feels threatened by this wolf because every time the wolf appears, something goes wrong at the property. So there's our similarity between our two Bills. Next, we can look at Ross and Ollie. This is a handyman at the lodge. So in the book, we have Ross, who is seemingly a really friendly ranch hand, but he kidnaps the wolf and wolf dog puppies for financial gain. So he's not a very nice guy. Then we have Ollie, who is from the game, and he tries to kill the wolf and is repeatedly unsuccessful. So though their roles as ranch hand or handyman is the same, their personalities are different. Ross is a culprit in terms of kidnapping the wolf and her puppies. Ollie is not a culprit, but he definitely doesn't want the wolf around. So second to last, we've got Dodie and Yanni. So athletes and sports enthusiasts, that's what their shared role is. So in the book, we have Dodie and his son Dexter, who are holidaying at the Elk River Ranch. Dodie is friends with Bill Arrett and actually leaves this threatening note for Bill at the ranch, but Dodie didn't read it. He didn't know what it contained, and he admits to that later on and feels guilty about it. But otherwise, he's very athletic. He's constantly out of the lodge skiing or doing some other sporting event. In the game, we have Yanni, who is a world-class skier. So also very into sports. That's his livelihood. He also claims to fear wolves and that his competitors are trying to scare him with bombs. In reality, he's behind the detonations that are occurring around the Icicle Creek drainage, and he's doing this in attempts to detect uranium. So despite their similar personalities and love for outdoor adventures, they are two very different characters. Dodie's a really nice individual, doesn't seem to have problems with the wolves. Yanni, on the other hand, fears wolves and is our culprit for the game. And then finally, rather than human characters, I thought we would look at the wolf. So we have Rainbow and Isis. So in the book, we have Rainbow, who is a tame pet wolf kept by the Marshalls. As noted earlier, her mother and siblings drowned when she was a few months old, and she now has a litter of her own. And she's kidnapped or wolf-napped. In the game, we have Isis, who spent time with sort of a hermit, Julius McQuaid, which is what led her to not fear humans quite so much. She was used to being in his company, and she is often spotted around Icicle Creek. And there are our characters. So the last thing I'm going to look at that's really related to the game, there are two more points I'm going to go over, but relating to the book and game differences is we've got the ending, which I debated whether or not to include, but I figured I've done that for most, if not all, videos, so I will here too. So as I just noted, they are quite different. In the book, Nancy and George are following Ross, again that's the handyman, via snowmobile to Stella's house. Stella, again, is Paul's aunt. They sneak into the home and find Rainbow and her puppies there. They then hear the doorbell ring and discover that a buyer has come for one of the puppies. Nancy winds up being spotted by the group. The group doesn't know that George is there, and they are sort of threatening Nancy, want her out of the house. George, meanwhile, sneaks out of the room that she was hiding in, goes up behind the buyer and whispers to him, telling him that what he's about to be involved in is actually an illegal sale, and he needs to go get the police, because obviously there's trouble. So he books it. Nancy and George then try to fend for themselves, try to escape, but Ross and Stella wind up getting the upper hand, and they plan to do away with the sleuths. They're going to go put them in a bear cave. But before they can do that, the police arrive. So fortunately, the buyer did the right thing. Rainbow and her puppies are safely returned to the Marshalls. And going back to sort of that conflict between the ranchers and Paul wanting to build a sanctuary, they wind up scheduling a friendly meeting to find a compromise for both the ranchers and the sanctuary. So it's sort of a really nice way that they tie up that story. Then we can look at the game. We have Yanni, who sets off a bomb in Trapper Dan's Needle, where Nancy and Isis are. Fortunately, they escape, and then Nancy chases Yanni by snowmobile. So we've got that snowmobile element in both endings. Yanni crashes, and the truth of his intentions and why he's in Alberta is revealed. Isis is then rehomed to a wolf sanctuary. So those are how our two stories wrap up. So as I noted, I just have two other points I really want to bring up, which I think are really important and really interesting. So again, these are elements that come up in both the book and the game. So we have wildlife-human conflict, and this is a big deal. So both stories mention conflicts when wild animals and people interact in the same environment. The book's main focus is on fears of wolves from the forthcoming sanctuary, and those wolves leaving the boundaries and attacking cattle. The story also references the real events of reintroducing wolves from Alberta to Wyoming. It does talk about this. This is something that happened in the 90s, and I'll get to in a little bit. In the game, the wolf is blamed for accidents that occur at the lodge in more of a supernatural sense. Not that she was actually physically responsible, not that she, got in and tore things up, but she's blamed just in a superstitious sort of way. And it's the aim of one of the citizens to have the wolf safely relocated to a sanctuary where she will be safe from human-posed threats. So the form of the threats is a little bit different, although it is always wildlife-human conflict, but it's really great that they brought this up in both stories. And the final point is the locations of these two stories, and they are really important. They relate to real-life historical wolf projects. So the book is set in Wyoming, while the game is set in Alberta. And for those of you who don't know, in 1995 and in 1996, wolves were relocated from Alberta, Canada, to the Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. This actually happened. And I mentioned in my playthrough of the game that I had a book that I was pretty sure was about this, and I was correct. This is a book entitled The Wolf, A True Story of Survival and Obsession in the West, written by Nate Blakeslee. I'm about a third of the way through, and it's a very interesting book. I'm enjoying it. It's written really well, and it is all about this story of reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone National Park, having come from Alberta. So the locations of these two stories are intentional. They're really important and just brilliant. I really appreciate what was done there. So now, just to quickly conclude, the 2002 novel and her interactive's 2007 computer game adaptations both reveal the conflicts between wolves and humankind. This is sort of our main theme that is similar between the two. The general roles of characters remain the same. So that's sort of nice. We have a lodge owner, we have someone who's against the wolves, we have someone who is for sanctuaries and all that. Even though we have these very similar roles, though, the overall mysteries are different. And despite these differences, we have many elements that are utilized in both stories. So they're both set at a lodge. Again, we're talking about that wolf-human interaction, and there's an educational element to it. And even winter sport being included, be it through snowmobiles or having sports enthusiasts or champion skiers. Those both come up in both stories. And as a whole, I think that both of the stories are interesting. The novel has a really clear focus. So it really is about wolf sanctuary with the theft of Rainbow and her puppies. Whereas the game really could have benefited from choosing a single theme or two to tell us the story, rather than the handful that were included. I find the game is a bit too busy. And her interactive did keep the book's overarching narrative in their retelling, again, this about the conflict, despite the different crime and motivation of the culprit. And again, that difference is that in the book, it's about the theft of these wolf dog puppies to be sold, whereas in the game we have explosions and this wolf blamed for some accidents. There we have it, folks. That is my book to game comparison for The Mystery of the Mother Wolf and The White Wolf of Icicle Creek. I don't remember what I thought of the book when I first read it many years ago. I do find it interesting now as an adult because it brings up wildlife-human conflict, which I can appreciate in a different way as an adult, because I do tend to do a lot of wildlife-themed volunteer work. I go abroad to do that. I haven't done any of that with wolves. I've been to South Africa and will be heading back to the continent, or to the continent in August and September to do similar work. So I can appreciate this on a very different level than I used to, or did, when I first read it. The game, as I noted in my playthroughs, not one of my favorites. I don't actually enjoy it. And as I was doing the playthrough, I realized that I think part of why I don't enjoy it is because it's so busy. There's just too much going on. I can appreciate the attempt to include all these different themes and storylines, but I felt like that really lacked focus because of all of that. It was just too much. And I think that it could have been a better story if there'd been more of a focus on the wildlife-human conflict and maybe sanctuary, like in the book. I think that would have been more interesting. I didn't care for the Yanni storyline. it's never appealed to me. It just seems so out of left field. And there is this very real history, as previously noted, about reintroducing wolves from Alberta to Yellowstone in Wyoming. And I think that would have been a really great educational game that Her Interactive could have made. So they really missed that opportunity. I'm actually kind of disappointed knowing that that was the potential given the book that they based the game on. And I'm going to go back to talking about that nonfiction book that I mentioned, The Wolf by Nate Blakeslee. For anyone who is interested in the subject matter, who's curious about wolves, I know that there's a lot of literature out there. I just don't know any other titles. I happen to have this book. I bought it last February or March, and I've now picked it up after having played the game and read The Mystery of the Mother Wolf, and thought, oh, I'm going to follow this up with some actual historical reading. And it's very interesting. It's really well written. I, for years, didn't read nonfiction because I always thought it would be dry, much like textbooks are. I've been proven horribly wrong. Every bit of nonfiction I've read has actually been written incredibly well. It's very interesting, and I'm enjoying reading the books, and The Wolf is no exception. So if anyone who's watching this is wanting to learn more about the history of wolves being reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park and that human-wildlife conflict between ranchers and the sanctuary, or this, private game land, I do highly encourage picking up a copy of, again, this is The Wolf by Nate Blakeslee, or any other literature that's out there. Head out to the library, go to a bookstore, see what you can find. It is a fascinating history, and this was a great opportunity for a very interesting game. Unfortunately, Her Interactive didn't deliver in a way that they could have, but the book certainly is, I think, worth the read. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to watch or listen to this book-to-game comparison video. This was certainly one of the most interesting for me because of the true stories that are sort of behind it that unfortunately weren't explored very well in the game, but certainly are mentioned in a great way in the novel. Thank you once again, everyone, and have a safe and wonderful day. Bye-bye.